Today on Leaf by Leaf, John the Posthumous by Jason Schwartz. It is tempting to offer such a platitude as you either love it or you hate it. This is sort of like the microwave dinner of the book reviewer's toolkit. But this would be to appropriate a rhetoric that is compounding the fractious either-or social stratum that is tearing us apart in the culture at large. Rare is the case that the readers of a single book can neatly be divided into lovers and haters. It seems we are drawn to these antipodal edges, more so than to the middle grounders. Perhaps this is because, in some part, those on the extremes often bring in emotion, which is easy to connect with and respond to, whether in agreement or opposition. Perhaps it's because the middle road is too ambivalent in which way it leans. This is why, in politics, we have the convenient labels such as slightly left of and slightly right of center to situate which antipode is closer. But it may also be that the middle grounders, in terms of book reviews, present the ambiguity of indifference and non-confrontationalism. In any case, I found myself not loving the book, not hating the book, but merely liking the book. While my enthusiasm wasn't stimulated, my curiosity was. The book roused the puzzle lover within me. In preparing to read the book, which I bought directly from OR Books, I gleaned enough from my cursory glances to form connections with Gertrude Stein and Diane Williams. For a long time I have grappled with Miss Stein and come to the conclusion that she reads me more than I read her. Surely there's more going on in there than just exposing the complicated beauty of language. Namely, the fact that it can be so beautiful while denying its perceived primary function, that of communicating a message. The mellifluous strains of her word groupings tickle the ear and dazzle the palate, but constantly elude and frustrate the mind's furious attempt to quickly intuit and establish meaning. In Diane Williams, I have a video of her collected works that I'll link below. There are more of the trappings of a story, or at least some form of human kinesis, but the duck and dip and dodge of the prose upends the mind's expectations nonetheless. Certainly both writers are strong. Certainly both prove the primitive, putty-like nature of language. Certainly both writers' works seek to revive some dormant appendage within the human brain. Mine apparently needs much more electroshock treatment. But my thinking is, do we really need more books that operate in this particular metafictional vein? Upon reading John the Posthumous, however, I began to see that Jason Schwartz does have similarities to these dimensions of Stein and Williams, but there's something very unique going on here. By definition, I choose to situate this book in what could be called the Nouveau roman. The Oxford Dictionary of Literary Terms defines the Nouveau roman using Alain Robbe-Grier's essay Pour un nouveau roman to define the genre as a neutral registering of sensations and things rather than an interpretation of events or a study of characters. That seems to me to most adequately describe John the Posthumous, which subverts even its own title. In a parenthetical statement 29 pages into its 136, we get the only explicit reference to the intriguing historical figure. John the Posthumous, usually rendered in red, was a French king, alive for 5 days. That's it. Thus, this Nouveau roman is essentially a symbolist poem in the manner of, say, Mallarmé, arranged in prose form with a voyeuristic narrator that recalls Walt Whitman's Sleepers. I wander all night in my vision, stepping with light feet, swiftly and noiselessly stepping and stopping, bending with open eyes over the shut eyes of sleepers, wandering and confused, lost to myself, ill-assorted, contradictory, pausing and gazing and bending and stopping. Your first read of the book, like mine, will likely illuminate St. Paul's words when he said, "For now we see through a glass, darkly." Through repeated objects and moments, we register an adultery, or multiple adulteries, a murder, or multiple murders, and a house fire, or several house fires. If a single story is to be extracted, it seems that perhaps a jealous cuckold has burned down the house with his family inside. Yet, that may not be right, and those pronouns may point to the wrong role. It also throws into question the narrator. Is the narrator the one who set fire to the house? If so, how are they telling us? Is it a ghost? From a host of objects, posts, horns, hooks, knives, fires, bed sheets, the novel eventually defines itself as a marital history. And toward the end, the narrator says, "I should like to recount, at this point, before I fall ill, or am overtaken by distraction or melancholy, how we lost the house. But I can no longer remember the story." The principal figures in such an institution like marriage, and in the story at large, are relegated to the narrator's research, recounted through a self-admittedly faulty memory. In this way, the book is like reading an account of someone attempting to use the Roman room mnemonic device to recall hazy moments associated with objects in a room that they do know well. Thus, the house is effectively remembered more clearly than the actions within. At the same time, it can be read as a researcher's log of hours within a library, with its barrage of factoids from history and architecture and clothing and the natural world. Etymologies, idioms, and curios abound. Everything, however, is shrouded in uncertainty. Whenever a quantitative figure is given, for example, it is often followed by doubt. In the beginning, behind a grim little contraption, rather box-like in design, with 6 ordinary rivets, perhaps 7, perhaps 8. And words are frequently recast in different contexts, usually within the same breath. In terms of aesthetic quality, Schwartz's sentences are shorn down to meet a more minimalist demand and depend on proximity for their impact. The early sentence, in fact, "She vanishes in the bracken," gets its thrust from the preceding sentence and its lingering effect from the clipped subsequent sentence. Thus, from afar, the distance between the fence post and the road, say, or between you and the house, she appears to fall into a well. In fact, she vanishes in the bracken. Audrey is smallest. Schwartz appears to love taxonomy and classification and has a keen eye for irony. The brown-headed cowbird, as distinct from the white-throated finch, which attacks cattle, is entirely gray, in fact, in the female. The tone and style of the narrator read like something from 19th century England looking on America as the New World. Colors are used to give timbre to objects, as in the use of tone color and musicology, with the predominant color being red. As the narrator says at one point, "They believed me enamored of the color red." In retrospect, I can say that while the book wasn't very striking while reading it, its life seemed to become more luminous to me as I sifted through notes, considered marginalia, and flipped through the underlining on tabbed pages. Divided into 3 sections, the first is entitled Hornbook, which I had to look up. The American Heritage Dictionary gives 2 definitions for Hornbook. The first, an early primer consisting of a single page protected by a transparent sheet of horn, formerly used in teaching children to read. And secondly, a text that instructs in the basic skills or rudiments of a subject. In this way, the first section, itself divided into 10 brief chapters, can be seen as equipping us with the tools necessary to approach the rest of the book. Thus, whether this fails or succeeds will depend on your grasp of, or tolerance for, this initial orientation section.